So let's be a bit more concrete. I talk about the co-production of cultural policy and cultural action. We need to move away from the idea that services and activities like culture are produced simply by cultural institutions or even local authorities. They are co-produced in the same way that meaning in a book is co-produced between the writer and the reader. And these are some of the actors who are involved in the co-production of cultural action and policy. And it comes from the combined statements and actions of national, regional and local public authorities, independent and non-governmental bodies, local and non-local businesses. The commercial sector is one of the most significant creators of meaning in terms of our culture that you have. I'll give you just one example. 10 years ago, there were no American-style coffee chains in Britain. They came and they've all but pushed out the existing coffee houses there used to be. And they've done it by creating an idea of what a coffee house is, that is essentially the coffee house out of Friends. They've made us all believe that if we go to Starbucks, we will live like the people in Friends, and we will have friends like the people in Friends. So local and non-local businesses are really important parts of the cultural life of your city. Then there are professional artists and companies, amateur and voluntary artists and associational life, and what I call informal and unknown activity, which is particularly important nowadays. All the music and films and writing that young people are creating in their bedrooms, on their computers, and sharing with each other, that I have no inkling of the existence of, or the meaning of, or the function of. That's why it's complex, and why I can't understand it. But it is really, really important in terms of shaping our minds, in terms of creating meaning. And those two groups need to be understood as having different functions. So the first group are mostly people who buy and supply culture. And they do it from the second group, the group of producers and what I call prosumers. Prosumer is a word that has emerged in English in the last 5 or 10 years to refer precisely to those kids in their bedrooms making work with their computers. It means producer consumers. And it's a really useful word because it suggests that it's actually more accurate. We are all producer consumers. We are all prosumers of culture. When you read a book, you are being a prosumer, which is why none of us ever reads the same book. We are inventing that book for ourselves, in our own imaginations, every time we are reading. And so we need to move away from simplistic ideas that culture is a good that is produced by some people for consumption by other people. We need to get away from it, partly because it's not true, and partly because even if it were true, it's not right. Because we all have the right to imagine ourselves culturally and artistically and present ourselves culturally and artistically in our society. So how does all that turn into a city cultural strategy? What can a cultural strategy do? The first question. Oh, sorry, I have to go back. Here we go. This is now become the symbolic ideal of what a city cultural strategy can do. How many of you recognize this building? Put your hand up if you know what this building is. You don't know what this building is? Really? Okay, it's the Guggenheim in Bilbao. Right? This is probably the most talked about contemporary art museum, because until Frank Gehry and the Guggenheim Foundation built this museum in Bilbao, most people hadn't heard of Bilbao. On the back of this, it's been able to create a much stronger tourism industry, and on the back of this, many cities are wanting to create this kind of very modern, contemporary image for themselves. But it is an image, and I think it's exactly the same, has the same reality as this. It's a dream, it's a fantasy that we would like to have about a kind of life, a kind of ideal. But can you really see this in Lublin? You could build the Guggenheim in Lublin. Most of the world's big museums have got this idea that it's a good idea to go to poor places and build extensions of themselves. The Louvre, for instance, in Paris has just opened an external museum in Metz, in eastern France, a town that I'm sure most of you have never heard of. And it's being put there partly because the Louvre has far too much artwork than it could ever show, and as a government project to regenerate Metz through cultural tourism. So it's not impossible for the government of Poland to decide, we'll invite the Louvre to come and build a nice trendy museum with a Japanese architect in Lublin. And then all the architectural press will come to Lublin and take nice blue pictures of how beautiful it is. And some people will come here. But I don't think that's what cultural strategies need to be about. Because as I said at the beginning, it's not a collection of capital goods. It is a process. It's what you do for yourselves. Now, I'm sorry, you can't see this very well because the slide, you can see the image underneath. Liverpool was European Capital of Culture in 2008, and they had a really big set of aspirations for what they would do. They didn't build a big building. They actually had an idea to build a big building. They commissioned a very fashionable architect to build the big building for them, but then they ran out of money, which is probably a good thing in the end, because it forced them to focus more on the things that are said here. So the kinds of things they looked at were economic growth, cultural vibrancy, cultural participation, image and identity, social capital, physical environment, and management. And under all of these things, they were concerned that their Capital of Culture program would make an impact on these issues.